Welcome to A Matter of Perspective with Judge Derwin Webb. I am Judge Derwin Webb, coming to you from the Frazier History Museum. You know, it's not too often that you get an opportunity to speak to a living legend, but that's what we have today. I'd like to welcome my good friend, Mr. Jack Goose Givens. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much, Judge, for having me on. It's always good to see you and get to spend some time with you. I'm looking forward to this opportunity.
Man, it's always great to have people on the show, but it's always great to have people on the show that you actually know really well and really developing friendships and relationships with. You and I met a few years ago and we started talking, but over the course of a few years, it seems like we've grown into a good friendship. Talk a little basketball, talk a little blue and red here and there, but we always have something good to talk about because we try to be as cordial as possible about the game, but we're good friends at this point too.
Well, and that's one of the things I try to impress upon fans from both sides. You know, I mean, I have a lot of friends who I consider friends, and I think they consider me friends, who played basketball at U of L, and Robbie Valentine and I are good buddies. We've done a lot of things together. Of course, Griff and all the guys. After basketball, we understand that that's part of it, but we have been able to form friendships. Scooter and Rodney and I are buddies. So, and we've had opportunities to do a lot of things together over the years. So it is good to sometimes get together and joke around and poke fun and talk I'm better than you and you're better than me kind of stuff. But it's always good to get together. No question about that. And I'm happy to say I have a lot of friends who wore the red and black. So
right.
Nothing wrong with that.
You know, the crazy thing is that I think people believe that just because the fans go at it, we do as former players or as current players. I tell people sometimes that some of my good friends are former UK basketball players. I ran a business with Jamal Bashburn. I grew up with Sean Woods. So it's a game for us. Now, we want to win that game. It's a game for us. But in some circles, I listen to some podcasts or some television shows or radio shows. It's life for them. But it's a game for us. But it's always nice to keep things in perspective.
Yeah. Exactly.
Let's talk a couple things. I know you're from Lexington. You were former Mr. Basketball out of Lexington, praise All-American. Tell us about what life was like for you in high school growing up in Lexington, Kentucky.
Well, if I'm going to talk about my story, I have to start long before that because I grew up there in Lexington. I'm one of 10 kids. We lived in 3-bedroom housing project there in Lexington. So I ran the streets with the guys and with the people who lived around me. But I wouldn't change anything at all about that. I have had an opportunity to see things certainly from the bottom up when you think about my path over the course of my career to this point. But I wouldn't change a thing. Played basketball first time as a 7th grader, which at that time was junior high school. Didn't like basketball, so I quit the team. Made it as an 8th grader, still didn't like basketball. So I quit the team as an 8th grader. And then the summer between my 8th and 9th grade year, I grew from about 5'9" to about 6'4". So once that growth spurt happened, my coaches didn't give me an option. I was playing basketball if I was going to school. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, that's the way it was back in those days. And I'm glad I did. I mean, my 9th grade year, we had a great season at Dunbar Junior High School there in Lexington. We played well, had good teams, and then had an opportunity to go on and play in high school. And of course, I graduated from Bryan Station, but I started my high school career at Henry Clay. James Lee, who also played basketball at University of Kentucky, we were the same age. We had grown up together. I grew up in his church where his dad was the pastor. So we'd known each other virtually from the time we were 11 or 12 years old all the way up. But we started out at the same high school, and I often think what those high school teams would have been like had James and I been able to play. But we moved to Bryan Station District. First house we ever owned, a 3-bedroom house on the north side of town. So we were able to move out of the housing projects, and the rest is kind of history. I kept getting better and better at basketball. We had great teams at Bryan Station. Griff's team, Louisville Male, beat us one year in the semifinals of the state tournament my senior year. His freshman or sophomore year, I mean, he was just a baby, even though he played like a man. So they beat us one year in the state tournament. But the high school and growing up in Lexington was great, man. I wouldn't change anything. I grew up not knowing what a lot of people had, a lot of people outside of my circle, outside of my neighborhood. So I didn't want much. I just wanted to be happy, and I certainly was that. It was a great way to grow up.
Let me ask you this. You talked about being one of 10. Were you the only athlete or just one of the many athletes in your family?
Well, one of my older brothers, Michael, he played basketball at Henry Clay High School and turned out to be a pretty decent player. He went to San Diego State, all the way from Lexington. He went out to San Diego State. The Aztecs played a year or two with them and decided it wasn't right for him. He went to a junior college, if you will, out there, finished his career as a pretty decent basketball player out there in California. He met his wife there, and they are still out there after all of these years. They're still out in California and enjoying life in Southern California. My brother, a lot of people thought Bryan Station came after our family or after me to change and go to Bryan Station. The fact is, my brother was a track star. And at that time, Bryan Station was winning state tournaments in track and field. So they kind of came after my brother. And when my mother was able to afford to buy a house, they came after him and said, here's a nice neighborhood. And I just came along as a package deal, with my brother. So he was really good at track, high jump, long jump, and ran some of the hurdles, some of the distance races. And they won a state championship while he was there. But yeah, it was awesome to have an opportunity to do that, to go to Bryan Station.
Now, were you fully concentrated on basketball, or did you play other sports as well?
Well, when I was young, and one reason I quit basketball for a couple of years is I also played baseball, and I really enjoyed baseball. I liked baseball, played first base, and played up until my first year at Bryan Station, actually. Played a little bit of baseball, but I couldn't hit, man. I'd get up there, man, and I'd be about a mile from the plate because I thought I was going to get hit, man. And so I couldn't hit, but I could definitely play defense. I didn't miss much over there on first base. Of course, I'm left-handed, and they stuck me on first base, and I could gobble up about everything that came that way. But I couldn't hit that ball, man. I was scared to death, boy. And so once I really started focusing on basketball and started showing some promise in that, that's when I kind of stepped away from baseball and focused all my attention on basketball.
Well, let me ask you this question. You are a Lexington kid, growing up in Lexington, all things blue. When it came time, obviously I mentioned earlier that you were former Mr. Basketball, Parade's All-American. When it was time to look for a college, did you consider anything outside of University of Kentucky? Yeah. I considered a lot of schools. I mean, if you think about it, Derwin, back in those days, it was very difficult for me to look at the University of Kentucky team and ever think about going there because I couldn't look there and see anybody who looked like me. I mean, it was just. I'm glad you're talking about. I want to talk about that because that's something very interesting because there is a past history of issues with the University of Kentucky and people of color. Knowing that you went there, what helped you come to the decision to actually go there? based upon those issues?
Well, I was pretty fortunate because they had brought in a couple of guys by the time I had to make my decision. If you think about, of course, Tom Paine was there first. That situation didn't go well, and he only stayed there for a year before he entered the NBA draft and got drafted by the Atlanta Hawks. So Tom was there a few years before. Those years went formatively years where I was really trying to find. I was getting better at basketball. I had to start looking. I had to. If I thought I was going to play, I had to look at making decisions. But it was a difficult decision to make at that time. U of L didn't want me. I wasn't good enough for U of L, so I had to find somewhere else, man. And I'm just kidding. I'm kidding with that. Bill Olson about lived at my house. I mean, he was always there and always at my games and everything, recruiting. So I had an opportunity to look at the U of L program, which was good, and I did. But my second choice actually was the University of Tennessee. I at that time, I had never been outside of Lexington. We couldn't afford to get on a plane and go anywhere with 10 kids. The only place I went at that time was on a Greyhound bus to my grandmother's house, who lived in Danville, Kentucky. That's the only travel I could do. We didn't have a car. So I was very limited to the exposure of being able to travel. And frankly, getting on an airplane and flying somewhere scared me to death. I didn't want any part of it. So the only real visit I took, other than Richmond at EKU, but the only real visit I took was to the University of Tennessee. And I got on a Greyhound bus all by myself. I made every stop in every little town from Lexington to Knoxville, straight down I-75. And I went for a visit to University of Tennessee, and frankly, really enjoyed it there. Ray Mears was the coach, and Stu Aberdeen was there, and Coach Davis was doing a lot of the recruiting. So, until I really, really got serious about the University of Kentucky, I was going to Tennessee. I could have been there with the Ernie and Bernie show, which would have been an experience. So that was my second choice, really. The fact of the matter is, when it came time to make a decision, Coach Hall, Joe B. Hall, had come in, and he was making all kinds of big-time effort to integrate, to bring people of color, African Americans, in to be a part of that program. He hired Leonard Hamilton, who is still coaching to this day at Florida State.
Right.
At Florida State, he brought in Leonard Hamilton, and Leonard started the senior year of my high school. Leonard Hamilton started recruiting me heavily. So the program was changing. The feeling of the program was changing. The approach by the current staff was changing. So the timing was good. James and I had to make a decision, because James, I believe to this day, really wanted to go to U of L. I mean, that's where he wanted to go. He lives in Louisville now, as a matter of fact. So we had to really get down to the nitty gritty and make a decision: were we going to do this or were we not? And because of the effort that Coach Hall made, because of the addition of Leonard Hamilton to the staff, we decided that was the best move for us. And I'm frankly glad we did, because it not just changed things for us, but for the teams and the players to come after us. I think it went a long way in helping to get guys like Sam Bowie, Melvin Turpin, Dickie Bill, Leroy Bird, Derek Anderson. I mean, all of these guys who came after us, I think we kind of served as the big brothers to all of those guys making those decisions.
Right. Let me ask you this. You had a lot of success in college. Went to a Final Four in, I believe, 1974 in your freshman year. Actually won the championship your senior year. What was it like? Let me ask this question. You went to the Final Four in 1974, so you knew what it was like to get there, but you didn't get there in the next year, your sophomore and junior year. What did it take to get back to where you were your freshman year? Because I would imagine that if you do it after your first year, you think it's supposed to be like that every year. But it didn't happen like that every year. So tell me about the progress between your freshman and your senior year.
Well, a lot of things happened between that time period. I mean, my freshman year, 74, 75, we get to the final game against UCLA. And I thought that it couldn't get any better than getting to the final game of the NCAA tournament. Couldn't get any better, was my thinking. But I also thought that, well, this is going to be the way it is every year. We did it as freshmen, so why wouldn't we do it every year after this?
Right.
And I thought that way until the first game of the next season when we went up to Chicago and we got beat by a team up in Chicago, the very first game. And I think it was Loyola of Chicago. We went in there and we played them on their floor. And I thought, man, these teams are really wanting to beat us now, you know? So that was the first thing. I also found out real quick, if you think back to that freshman team, I had guys on that team like Kevin Greavy, Jimmy Dan Connor, Bob Guyette, Mike Flynn. I mean, we had some studs who were seniors on that team,
right,
who carried us. And I learned very quickly how valuable those guys were. And my sophomore year, you know, you have to realize that we were 10-10 at one point in that season. And we're on the verge of being the first team to finish 500 or under 500 at the University of Kentucky for a long, long time, you know. So we had one of those quote unquote player only meetings. We kind of had a come to Jesus meeting, and here's what we got to do, guys, to get ourselves back together and to get on the straight and narrow. And we were fortunate because we won our last 10 games of that season, the last 6 of the regular season, which nowadays would have gotten us back to the NCAA tournament. We got to the NIT my sophomore year. And as you know, back in those days, the NIT was huge because the NCAA only had like 32 teams. It's not a 64-team deal back then like it is now. So we won the NIT that year, finished up 10-0, won our last 10 ball games. So we kind of set the stage for the rest of my career. My junior year, we made it all the way through, probably our best team. We made it through and we lost to North Carolina in the final game of the grade 8, if you will, the game that would have gotten us to the Final Four. Right. We lost that game my junior year, so we were very, very good. We didn't lose very many games that year, and we were on the verge to getting back to the big dance my junior year. And so after we came up short that year and lost a very close game to North Carolina, and they had Mitch Kupchak, they had Phil Ford, they had Walter Davis, they had some great players. Right. Don't get me wrong. They were a very good team, and I don't think Mitch was on that team. He actually was there when we played him early in my career. But they had a great team. But we decided at that point, and when I say we, I'm talking about the seniors, Rick Roby, James Lee, Mike Phillips, and myself. we decided that it was on. We were going to get back to the Final Four and really try to win this thing my last time around. And we were able to do that.
Now, you were obviously champions. You won the championship in '78. You scored 41 points.
Right.
Still a UK record for the for the finals. Tell me about that experience for you.
Well, I'm still sending checks to the Duke Athletic Fund for not changing the defense up, man. Hey, I got to write a check now to send to them, man. It was interesting. They played a 2-3 zone. They were obviously concerned with our inside people because we had Rick Roby, Mike Phillips in there. James Lee was great around the basket, and a number of other guys who could just dunk in people's faces. They were very concerned about that. We were a very balanced team in that we had Kyle Macy and Truman Claytor and Jay Scheidler. We had guys who could flat shoot the rock. And then there was me, who, although was the leading scorer, they felt like their zone could adjust enough to keep me from scoring in the range that I like to score. We didn't have a three-point line back then, so we didn't shoot any really, really far out shots because we didn't need to. We came along at a time when guys could make a living off of 15 to 17-foot jump shots. I mean, our offense was designed for that. And it just so happened that I was the one who, within our offense, got a lot of those shots from that distance. I started out that game pretty slow, actually, but we kept whittling away and figuring out how to handle the defense. When we finally, just before halftime, realized that there was a gap in the zone that if I get the shot there, or if I got the ball in that gap, I could then attack the basket, create shots for myself and the other bigs under the basket. Well, once I started turning around and looking, catching the ball around the free throw line, extended all the way around the circle, there was no defense there. So I started shooting the ball, and the ball started going in, and I started shooting it more, and I scored the last 16 points of the first half, had 21 at halftime. So a lot of those points came late. And we thought, well, here's what's going to happen. They're going to make adjustment. They're going to take this middle part of the game away. And then I was still attacked, but then dump it to our bigs under the basket. Well, they never made adjustments, and the shots kept being there, and I kept shooting them. And for some reason, they kept going in. So 41 points later, we're up on the scoreboard and we win the national championship. So it was awesome to go through, man. I tell you, we had been so close. Losing to UCLA by a few my freshman year, winning the NIT my sophomore year, missing the Final Four by one game my junior year, and then fighting every day. We were ranked number one the first day of the season, and we were ranked number one the last day of the season. The regular season. So every game we had people coming at us, man. We had to really, really work. And it was difficult to have a day off, man. We had to bring it every night. We did, except for 2 games that year. We finished 30-2 after the championship. And like I say, figured out a way to win that thing. And it's been awesome every day since.
I tell you this, you may be the most humble person I know, because
Well,
you talk about all these great players, talk about all the talent that was around you, even the talent that you played against. But it would be interesting to say that you scored over 2,000 points without a three-point line. So,
right.
So you were not just a guy that just happened to get in every once in a while. You were not only leading score. You scored over 2,000 points. People marvel at someone that scores 1,000. You did it. You did 2,000 without the three-point line.
Yeah, and It was fun doing it. I actually like not being the headline guy on a team. Now, when I would think when other teams did the scouting report, I probably was first on who we have to stop. But I tell you, man, when you have guys setting screens like Rick Roby, who is a 7-footer, weighed about 260. Mike Phillips, who is a 7-footer, he weighed about 260. James Lee was 6'6", 6'7". But when he hit you, you thought he weighed 260 because he put his body on you. I mean, when you have those guys setting screens, and when I was as open as I was, I had to make shots. I didn't have a choice, man. Right. I mean, they gave it up for me, and I have to give them a lot of credit. There's only been 3 players in the history of Kentucky basketball to score over 2,000 points. I mean, you think about it. There have been a bunch of dudes come through there playing basketball, and some really, really good and talented players who have played there. Dan Issel is first. Kenny Walker came in after me. I was exactly 100 points behind Dan Issel. And Kenny Walker came in and he snuck his way in between Dan and I. I give Kenny a lot of hard time, man. And the first thing he says, Goose, I'll give you 100 points, man, if you let me have a championship. You know, you let me have that ring and I'll give you 100 points so you could be number 2. And that's what it's all about, man. I mean, success is a great thing and all the success I enjoyed there. But you learn very quickly, you don't win a championship unless everybody does their job. You can't have anybody take a day off, man. And we had guys who were willing to sacrifice and to make those commitments to do what it took to get it done. And a coaching staff, you have to have good coaches. And we were very blessed to have all those ingredients working together at the same time.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a quick question. It's going to be a question that hopefully will be a small answer. But I know it can't be because I know how I'm going to style the question. Question is, what do you think about the game of basketball today? I know that things have changed over the years. What is your impression of basketball today? Is it favorable? Are you disappointed in how the game is played today? What are your thoughts of basketball today?
Well, the quick answer is I'm not a real big fan of the game today. Now, I love basketball, so I find a way to love it. But when you and I came out, we learned fundamentals first. Mm-hmm. I mean, we came in at least knowing how to screen out. Mm-hmm. We came in at least knowing what a pick and roll was. We came in knowing what help and recover defense was about. Because of AAU basketball and because of the mentality that says we're going to score, and the way we're going to win is by outscoring the other team in AAU basketball. Fundamentally, they're not sound. Now, I'm speaking for the guys I see come in at the University of Kentucky because I go to practice and I watch these guys, and it's just amazing to me how much they have to learn in order to be effective once they get here. And I'm talking about 5-star this and 4-star that, all this stuff we hear. But to keep it short, knowing that it's an individual game now more than college, than team game, I'm not as favorable towards it as I was, say, 10, 12 years ago.
Right. I will say this. I was in Indianapolis last week talking to my high school coach, and we were talking about the game, talking about basketball itself. and we were talking about how things have changed over the years. And one thing that he said makes perfect sense now. He said, today kids are not as concerned about losing because of AAU basketball. He said that you play 100 games during the summer. He said once you get finished with one game, whether you win or lose, you're going to play another game anyway, so no one really cares. People don't care about losing as much as they used to, and that really burns me because I used to hate to lose at anything, still do. Used to hate to lose everything. I think now kids are so used to just playing. If they lose, no big deal, I go out and play again.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%, man, and that's a great point. And I know they have to care because I don't know how they can play and not care about losing.
Right.
I'm kind of like you. I just don't know how you can't. But I agree with you in a lot of ways, man. It takes the value. AAU takes the value off of a win, how important that win is. I mean, and when you lost a game, the next day in practice or the next time you're on the court practicing, man, you tried to kill somebody, man. I mean, you did everything you possibly could for that not to happen again. You don't see that quite as much now, and that's a little bit disappointing.
It's unfortunate. I do have one last question to ask you. If you could change anything, would you?
Well,
you've had a very successful college career. You played well professionally. Is there anything that you would do differently? And if so, what would it be?
If I could change one thing, man, I would have this name, image, and likeness thing come along a long time ago, man. I'm just kidding. I couldn't pass that up, man. But I would have had that come along a long time ago because we could have done some damage financially if we were there. But realistically, man, I don't know that I would change anything, especially growing up as a kid. Knowing what I know now and having had an opportunity through basketball to interact with people who were some of the wealthiest people in the state of Kentucky, playing pro basketball, some of the wealthiest people in the country, seeing how those kids grew up and all the things that were afforded them simply because they could do it if they wanted to do it. Even knowing all of that, man, I'm going to paraphrase. It's just not, I know what it's like. Paul or somebody said this in the Bible. He said, I know what it's like to have nothing, and I know what it's like to have plenty. And I'm happy to say I was blessed in either of those situations. And it's really good, man. Mm-hmm. I've been so fortunate. I'm sorry. I've been blessed. No. I've been blessed so far above what I deserve. And I wouldn't change one thing, man. My mother, she's still alive and she is the best woman in the world. I love her. She was my idol growing up, and she taught me the right way to do it as best she could. My father wasn't around, so I didn't have that kind of guidance. But if my older brother or sister told me to do something, I did it. Mm-hmm. I ain't asked why. So, yeah, I've seen a lot, but I wouldn't change a thing, man. I'm been so blessed, and everything has not always been perfect. But even in the imperfect times, I wouldn't change a thing because it is who I am today and has helped make me who I am today. So no, I wouldn't change a thing, man. I'd leave it alone.
Man, I appreciate it. Man, you can't have me almost crying on my own show now. Come on, man.
I'm sorry, man. I didn't know I was going to go there. It's my bad.
No, you're good, man.
But it is what it is.
Man, I appreciate you taking the time to come out here. It's always great to have people on the show, like I said, like you know, but knowing the person that you are, the character that you have, and what you mean not only to the city but to the state as well, man, it's great to have friends like you, and I just want to say thank you for being here, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, D. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I tell you this, I like to close by always saying it's not a matter of what you say, it doesn't even matter what I think. At the end of the day, it's all a matter of perspective. Brother Givens, thanks for being here.